Well, okay, early broadcast today. A little bit harried over here. I am pleased to welcome my guest this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Of course, we have the great David Hawkins of Abel Danger. David, how are you? So lovely to see you.
Well, I'm very well, thank you, Jason. I hope you're not accusing me of harrying you.
No, it's not you at all. I don't know, David, if you're aware of the phenomenon known as the time phone hack. Have you
No, I
familiarized
haven't heard
yourself
of
with
that.
this? Haven't heard of that. The
No.
time phone hack is ongoing. It is a sort of a philosophy experiment. It's a man-machine, human-computer interface experiment. It was created by the great Quinn Michaels, a guy I would really like you to speak with and sort of get that sharing of knowledge going on. But basically, the time phone hack is a wonderful and creative thing that we can get into a little later, but it's I've just been out of time lately, so I'm glad we're on. I'm glad to have you. And of course, our episode today is about SERCO's Piranha Toyshop and Obamacare ethnic ammo, which admittedly I'm a little confused by this, but I know you will illuminate both our audience and myself by telling us exactly what it is this is all about.
Well, thank you, Jason. And you mentioned man-machine time hack, I think, and
Yes.
that just triggered a little blowback to my past because I wrote a paper on the analysis of expert thinking that was published in the International Journal of Man-Machine Studies in 1983. So I kind of been at this a long, long time.
Well, David, that's the very essence of the time phone hack. The notion being that the very act of discussing time phone hack or tweeting about time phone hack, I've now hacked your future. Because when you came onto this call, you did not realize that we would be discussing that paper from 1983. And the hope is that it will now lead you to some other chain of thinking that will bring about something that otherwise would not have happened. So to my understanding, that's the purpose of the time phone hack. It's a little bit of a joke that Quinn came up with, but it's basically an inspirational effort that really anything that you do, that you set your mind to and start talking about and tweeting about and sharing with your friends, can impact the future in a positive way. So that's the essence of the time phone hack. And of course, Quinn and I did the Hack to the Future episode. I don't know if you can see that. I think I've got you on screen share right now. But enough about time phone hacking. Let's talk about the largest company that nobody's ever heard of and what it is they're doing with Piranha toy shops and the whole thing with the Obamacare. We've been talking about Valerie Percy, you and I. There's so much for us to discuss.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, so Piranha, it's a very nice initialism. My first flirting with the initialism was related to Christine Marcy, who I think when we understand Field's sister a little better, she will put Dr. Mengele in the shade because she's a failed medic. That is to say, I don't know which at university. She wanted to study medicine, but she flunked it, according to her brother. And she went on to become the most dangerous bureaucrat in America's history. So
now,
that's quite
may
a
I
transition.
stop you there for just a moment, David, because I know we don't
Sure.
want to give a lot of attention to this, but I have to respect the balance between listening to and processing opposing views and also measuring who. There are a lot of people who come at me, David, who try to I've been watching a lot of videos about gang stalking, and I've certainly been the subject of that activity. It's sometimes very low level where it's just messages, phone calls, disruptive behavior along
Jason,
those
do
lines.
you mind if I just jump in here,
Yes,
right? Because
please.
I think we only have an hour, right?
Yes.
And as I go through my logic and analysis of Christine Marcy, I think what I can convey to you and your listeners is how to protect yourself against these characters, and they may be bots, they may be virtual identities that harass you and decoy you. And, we're now in the closing stages of this war, and we don't have much time to waste. And
Okay,
I think
I
you might be
apologize.
talking about this guy, Kevin Warsaw.
Yes, I'm trying
And
to accommodate his requests without overwhelming us.
Well, you won't be able to, because he's backed up by this device, which is part of the Piranha project that developed by Kinetic North America,
right,
which has been patented, and it's called a social engineering protection appliance, right? And essentially what that does, it identifies people like you and me and Field McConnell as potential bearers of the truth, and attacks us in every which way, either reputationally or scientifically. And if we get decoyed, they win. And I would invite you to ignore Kevin Warsaw, or let him go after some other bot, or turn on his handlers while we continue. Because, like I say, I think we've got just an hour. Is that a reasonable request?
I will take that advice from you, sir. Let's carry on.
Okay. So let's talk about the Piranha project.
Yes.
And this is an initialism that's meant to describe the Churchill Toyshop devices from World War II that have carried through to the present time. And it allows the custodian of the United States Patent and Trademark Office and its British counterpart to wage war on what I think magnificently in America you call we the people.
Mm-hmm.
Now that means you, that means me, that means Kevin Warsaw if he's a real human being, etc. And we're all in this matrix. And I never quite remember whether we're supposed to be taking the red pill or the blue pill. But my work going back to 1983, when that paper was published, was to see if you could, on these major information networks, filter out the falsehoods, the lies, with the truth.
Yes.
So essentially, the deductive computing machine, which I invented back in the 1980s, looks at data that's being injected into the website, for example, and helps we the people determine who's lying and who's telling the truth. Now, I think in your soul, you're confident you're telling the truth. I'm confident I am. Phil McConnell is. Heaven knows what Kevin Warsaw did. I'm not sure if he could recognize the truth if it reared up and bit him on the nose.
Well,
so he's a
he might
puppet,
be
like
confused.
all of these bots.
He might be confused. I don't know.
Absolutely. So let me look at the Piranha initialism, and I've added an H because Piranha is properly spelt. I think it's a Portuguese or a Spanish word, and over the N there's one of those little diddly things. I don't know what they're called.
Enya, yes.
Is that it? It's an Enya. So is it piranha? Is that how you pronounce that fish?
Perhaps. I know they cook them in certain areas of the world, and you can eat.
Well, you don't want to
piranha.
fall in a pool with piranha because apparently they'll nibble you to death, right?
They can skeletonize a cow.
Right, in no time at all. So I looked at piranha and then piranha and then piranha, which is the name of a project at the University of Tennessee and the Battelle Institute. Right? And it's a really, really scary project because it collects data about people and it sorts it and puts it in front of, I don't know, the Kevin Warsaws of the world and tells them, investigate that character, and here are some characteristics of that individual which you might exploit or invent. So you've been accused.
I'm trying to find that Piranha project, and I'm having
okay,
a
it's
difficult
Piranha, Piranha.
Uh-huh.
And there's a patent that is attributed or assigned to University or UT Battelle. And I've actually put the text in the Skype to you. So on your Skype, text from me, you'll see
I think
the
I've found
abstract.
it here. ORNL, Oak Ridge National Laboratory?
Correct.
I see. We have it here.
Now this is, so going back to this Piranha project, it would appear that the British, together with the Americans, and in particular the SERCO folks at the Defense Ammunition Center, have developed an array of what I would call ethnic bullets or ethnic ammunition, where they're desperately trying to load up the hollow point ammunition with anything that can be tuned to the ethnicity of the target. So if they can develop or invent something that is particularly dangerous for white people, then they could put that in the bullet. Or if they wanted to eliminate or reduce the population of blacks or Jews or Jesuits or whatever, this is being done at the university level by a bunch of very dangerous academics.
Wow.
Now, including at the University of Northwestern University, you have people like Bernardine Dawn, who was a long-time faculty member, who, as you know, I think we discussed that relatively recently,
Yes.
gave seminars on torture, paradigms, and practice. Well, how does that grab you?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, it's crazy, but it's also very sinister, and it's also very dangerous. And I've just been reading about Sun Tzu, and the first principle of war is deception. Now, I defy anyone going into Abel Danger to determine what we're doing. Sometimes I have difficulty myself. We have Field, who is a master tactical deceptor, right? Who can reach from a true mastery of airborne combat and actually defeat enemies in his F-4 fighter. And he's got some stories that he'll tell you one day about how to project deception up in the air at 2,000 miles an hour closing speed. Well, I've never done that, but I was captain of school chess for a while, not because I was the best player, but I was a strategic deceiver, if that's the right word. So I was captain, and I played on the middle board of a 5-man team, or 5-boy team. We never lost, and I was a kind of pivot point because my strategy was most inferior players can't handle complexity. So I wouldn't take any pieces. Right, so the central board would get totally clogged. Like I say, a really good player could take me to the cleaners, but that's the way it is. Most not inferior, but not top-notch players will look at complexity and their brain goes dead, right? And then I would watch their body language, and I would watch their eyes scanning over the board and see where they were distracted to. And then I'd focus my trap, my sudden move that would break through and defeat them, in the area away from where they were focused.
Wow.
Right? So I would suck them
amazing
into...
chess strategy.
Well, it is, but like I said, I wasn't the best player, so the boy at the top board would beat me.
Wow.
Because they didn't have a problem with complexity and they had opening gambit. And you know what, Jason, this is the kind of war we're in right now. You've got to look at the body language or the perception or the focus of the enemy and see, are they being distracted into an area where they can ultimately be ambushed and destroyed? And I think this Piranha project, okay, it's an invented initialism on my part to describe a series of weapons, which I'm going to go through now. But as far as the government is concerned and the senior executive service, they've funded a project at the University of Tennessee and Battelle Institute at the Oak Ridge thing to gather medical records on people. And I thought, damn it, that's what Obamacare was about. Now, the scandal of Obamacare has dissipated, but you were aware that all of the software functions of Obamacare sort of collapsed in a Canadian, because that project was run by CGI of Montreal.
Sorry, David, it collapsed in a what?
A Canadian-sponsored heap, because Canada, through CGI, I think it is, of Montreal, got the contract to develop the Obamacare software.
The Clinton Global Initiative, CGI?
No, it's, I don't know, CGI, it's initial, I think it's CGI. It's a Montreal-based firm that got the contract to develop the Obamacare software, which, as you know, went down in a tank. What they had to do was introduce a back office company to start going through the applications for Obamacare manually. And they awarded a $1.2 billion contract. Guess to whom?
SERCO?
Yeah.
Huh.
So SERCO is now trawling through the medical records of we the people, or more specifically you Americans, looking for patterns to which it can attribute a vulnerability or a disorder. So let's say they decide that you are a climate denier. Now, this climate change nonsense is beyond risible, where they say a trace element of fertilizer gas, which is carbon dioxide, is causing catastrophic anthropogenic global warming. However, the danger is, and it's a bit like when they sent or tried to send Field to a shrink to prove that he was unfit to fly. Under the Russian psychiatric wards and MK Ultra, etc., if you are deemed to be a climate denier, you are considered to have a disorder or an abnormality, which will result in possibly you dying earlier than you thought you should. So, for example, you can take a plane out of the air if you think or you deem the passengers to be violating the cap arbitrarily set by Obama at the Copenhagen conference.
I've heard a lot about this.
Sorry?
I've been hearing a lot about this lately because, again, this is, part of the whole the gang stalking thing where they try to make people feel like they're crazy and, get them to go to a psychiatrist or something. But David, have you seen this? It's been all over this weekend, this article about the government accidentally releasing information about electromagnetic weapons that are controlling people's minds?
No, I haven't seen that.
Well, let's take a look at that real quick.
Well, can we stay with the...
Oh, yes, sure.
Yeah, you see, I mean, again, with time is focus, and I think as far as Abel Danger is concerned, we understand absolutely that the first principle of war is deception, and I think we're very good at that, to the point where I quite often don't know what we're doing, right? Equally, we need to see when the enemy is distracted or vulnerable, and then basically plunge the dagger in its heart, right?
Yes.
So the enemy, as we've said many, many times before now, is clustered around three organizations. SERCO, the British company, which has as its shareholders 10 global custodians with $80 trillion of assets under management, three governments, including the United Kingdom government, the Saudi Arabian government, and the Singaporean government, and three radical revolutionary pension funds that represent the payments to the teachers, faculty, which includes Hillary and Bill Clinton and Barack and Michelle Obama.
Right.
And their United Kingdom counterparts, which is the university superannuation scheme that, for all I know, paid the pensions of people like the keeper of the Queen's pictures, the famous spy Anthony Blunt, who was a pedophile.
And I can't help but notice that these pension funds keep coming up. There must be something about the monitoring or regulation or lack thereof of pension funds that makes them attractive to fraudsters, because we've heard from Harmon Wilfred how John Suthers, who's now the governor of Colorado Springs, was involved in a fraud related to the pension fund for the city there in Colorado that he was somehow involved with.
Well, the Teachers Pension Fund is a major investor in Boeing, but we can come to that. So let me go to the initialism of Piranha.
Yes.
As it presently stands, until I introduce the H, which stands for health, but I'll do that with the next post, and maybe we can discuss that at the next time.
And I'm sorry to keep intruding, but there is one very important thing I want to point out that speaks to the deception. On this Piranha webpage, can you see it on the screen share? Even here, they've got it spelled in two different ways, and that might contribute to why I was having such a difficult time finding this. Do you see that?
Exactly. You see, these guys are masters of deception, but they're not as smart as you and I. Right? Well, for a variety of reasons. Because I was going through The Art of War by Sun Tzu,
yes,
which is studied by military experts through the centuries, including British military and the American military, and he's supposed to be one of the greatest writers.
Right.
But, he describes something that makes his kind of war, I think, very vulnerable, because he talks about the morality of the general. Now, the generals in this conspiracy aligned against we the people, they have no morality. They're leading through fear and terror and greed, right? Yeah. And that makes them vulnerable. because we, the people, how can I say this? In my instincts, we are an honorable collective. That is, we're manipulated, we're hammered, we're taxed, we're distorted, etc. But deep within the people, and the kind of people that you reach, Jason, there's the truth and there is honor. And if we mobilize we the people, and I've got a mechanism that I want to talk about with you perhaps at some other time, where people like you act as catalysts for community-based crowdsourced funding of crime scene investigation, where the money generated by these movies could be greater than any James Bond series, and a significant proportion of it goes back into the community where the crime was committed. So we have this obscene crime up in BC that is being pushed under the carpet, where probably 60 prostitutes, primarily First Nations prostitutes, were abducted from the downtown east side, which is the poorest postal district in Canada, taken out to a pig farm, and I believe now that they were shot with ethnic ammo to see how quickly they would die and what pain they would die. And there were snuff films produced with people betting on the length of time it would take them to die.
Wow.
Using ethnic ammo. Now, pretty horrible. Yeah, I can see you got the cutting up there from the Telegraph. And it looks like, Jason, this is an extraordinary crime which I believe the community and people like you and I and maybe talk show hosts around the world can help catalyze a movement within the community where extras and actors and film crews are provided by the community, and you solve the problem or the crime in that community, and you identify the organization which committed that crime. So let me go back to P. Go ahead.
Yeah, what about this informs us to here it says skulls had bullet wounds caused by .22 caliber bullets, but what about it tells us that it was ethnic ammunition?
It doesn't. I'm suggesting it is ethnic ammunition because there was a workshop at the pig farm and a secret gun cache. The women's body parts, some of them were put in a fridge, some were eaten at cannibal feasts, some were put in the food chain. What I'm saying, it's a scene of horror, of unimaginable, disgusting. So I've said, well, what was going on here? This was a federally registered society, right, that ran from 96 to 2002 and probably slaughtered up to 100 prostitutes.
So and this guy ran some kind of cult or something?
This guy, Willie Picton, he's in jail for second-degree murder, double life sentence, right? Because what the jury said, there wasn't the premeditation and pre-planning to justify a murder one charge. And this guy is mentally retarded.
Wow.
Right?
He's
incapable
crazy
of organizing something as sophisticated as that. There used to be 2,000 people at the raves at the pig farm, including the Vancouver police and the RCMP, and guests that flew up from the United States, probably in Field Sisters Conair, JPATs. Because you can't get 2,000 people out to a pig farm for a Friday night rave where a woman is murdered in public in front of a camera without a lot of organization, way beyond this guy, Willie Picton.
Yeah, 2,000 sounds like a lot. I mean, I've tried to have parties. It's tough to get 50 or 100 people organized to do something.
Right, and there were apparently a lot of, hard-faced women in leather gear out at this. There was a rock group that went out there, a grunge group, I think, Dead on Arrival, or, one of the songs is The Last Scream of the Missing Neighbors. I mean, this is sick. But let me come back to the P of Piranha.
Yeah.
All right? The P of Piranha stands for polonium. And polonium is the radioactive substance.
Yeah.
That was administered, I think his name is Litvinenko.
Yeah. Right.
In London, right? And they found a teapot in the Millennium Hotel, which was a hot teapot. I mean, this is James Bond, on steroids, if you will. Now, polonium is a relatively difficult thing to make, but it can be synthesized, I guess that's the right word, from a U.S. Atomic Energy Commission's method for recovering polonium-210 from bismuth, US 3463739A. And this comes back to my theory, or the Abel Danger theory, that they've got inside Churchill's Toyshop of patented devices. And opportunistically, they assemble a device. They pay the assignee for the use of that device for a use that was not intended by the assignee.
Now, David.
So the assignee receives money in the bank account, and then shortly afterwards, no doubt, or presumably, is horrified to learn that the device was used to produce the polonium-210 that killed Mr. Litvinenko.
Now, this is another one of the controversial aspects of your theory, which we had a patent lawyer or someone with some sort of legal experience in patents who challenged this assertion because this lawyer said that patent, owners don't get paid in that way. So I don't really know what the answer is, but how is it that this payment, I mean, this sounds like it's outside of the normal practice of how patents are licensed, et cetera. Can you elaborate on this part of the theory?
Yes, certainly. So under Crown rights rules, which sort of subsequent to Hillary Clinton getting into the White House, and people have identified that she wasn't a patent lawyer, but she was an intellectual property lawyer, it looks as though Crown rights rules spilled over into the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And it wasn't subsequent to Hillary Clinton. This goes back to 1802, when the first superintendent of the United States Patent Office, Dr. William Thornton, was an Anglo-American. And what the British or the UK Patent Office likes to do is reserve the right for the Crown to use the patent at any time of its choosing. So the exclusive rights are granted to the patentee or the inventor and the assignee, but the Crown reserves the right to use that patent as and when it uses. And this is done, how shall I put it? I think the Latin term is sub rosa. This is done in secrecy, right? Because what the Crown, or the equivalent in the United States, is doing is compromising the assignee. Essentially, they're saying to the assignee, we'll grant you the exclusive rights to use this shit, but periodically we'll come along and we'll use it covertly, and here's $1 million in your bank account. Now, there's a guy that you might want to Google, a guy called Detling, Dettling, in the context of the Unabomber attacks. All right? Now, this guy is heavily involved in the series of Unabomber attacks that started in 1978. And it would appear that he was being paid by agents unknown for the use of patents that were used to trigger the Unabombs, some of which killed people, some of which injured, but essentially they're aimed at airlines and universities to intimidate them. So Dettling, and if you look up patents, then you'll find, but that's another subject. So can I move on through Piranha?
Sure.
Okay. So the next thing is that is to say the injection of material that can kill you or paralyze you or give you great pain or put you in a coma. That requires an injection. Now, we've got these Skripals in the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
in Salisbury, that were seen on a park bench in a coma, from which apparently a couple of days later, Julia Skripal recovered enough to start using her Russian equivalent of Facebook.
Wow. Was that VK.com?
It's I can't pronounce it, but anyway, so she's made an amazing recovery, because if it was Novichok that was administered, she'd be dead.
Right.
So British intelligence and the people at Porton Down, where the facilities are managed by SERCO, they jump on this and say, this is a Russian product from the Cold War. The Russians say, we only had the precursor chemicals to Novichok. The program that was developed under was called Foliant, whatever that is in Russia. And they pointed out that the Russian chemical agent stockpiles were destroyed using the people from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency in the United States. Now, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency have been funding the development of the detoxification system patent at Northwestern University,
Right.
which works on Novichok. So all I'm pointing out is, right, the Russians are being set up by British and American intelligence to look like they've been attacking Russian emigres or double agents in London. But I think the Russian people in London that are getting killed or whacked are actually double agents for the British.
And the British are killing them?
Yes. To stop them blowing the whistle on this Piranha project.
But isn't it admitted that he's a double agent? I feel like the article we were just looking at.
He was a double agent. He was working for the British, right? He was arrested and jailed in Russia. And then as part of that exchange with the Anna Chapman, you know, the James Bond type female who a lot of men would die for, right? Quite happily, right? Yeah. Anyway, she's very well endowed. But there's a whole bunch of things, you know, where she's dressed in leather gear and holding guns and all that sort of thing. But basically, she was an entrapment specialist who apparently was tracking Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton sweeps both sides of the street, as I understand.
Right. And Charles Ortel has told me about a personal encounter he had. Someone invited him to a party where this woman, Anna Chapman, was, who apparently asked Charles, "Don't I know you from the Hamptons?" And this was some sort of code message to acknowledge, if you answer in the affirmative, that means you're down with the spying deal. And Charles had no idea what the hell she was talking about.
Right. Well, these people, well, you know, once you get to be a double or a triple agent, I couldn't make a triple agent. I'm not even sure I could make a double agent.
Right.
I'm so forgetful, I couldn't remember what I'm supposed not to be doing, right? But anyway, evidently there are people who thrive in that environment. And Sergei Skripal was a double agent for the British, right? In the exchange where Anna Chapman went back to Russia and Skripal went to the United Kingdom, he started living a normal life. And the general argument is when the spies have paid their price and they've been exchanged, you leave them alone. I mean, what's in it for Vladimir Putin to whack this guy, Sergei Skripal? And it turns out that, well, I've been trying to analyze why a laboratory in Switzerland, looking at the material allegedly associated with the Skripal coma, found a BZ gas, I think it's called. I can't remember the name.
Right.
But it's actually was nicknamed Buzz because it's a ultra hallucinogenic drug, right? That puts people into comas or makes them very aggressive. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be amusing if British and American intelligence had made a hollowed out bullet or ammo containing Novichok and BZ? That is to say, it could be shot into the Skripals with a little bit of Novichok and a fair amount of BZ, so you don't kill them, but you put them in a coma.
Were they shot, though? Was there a bullet wound?
They don't know. The British say they're having trouble locating it. Apparently there's Novichok on the door handle of the guy's front door, but you see, if you touch Novichok in any significant quantity and you're not treated within 10 minutes, you're dead.
Right.
I mean, it's 8 times more fatal or more effective than VX gas, which was invented by the British at Porton Down. So they're playing games with our brains.
Yes, we've got this quinaclidinyl benzylate. Is that
you
BZ?
have trouble saying it. I think you got to focus on that last word, the bi stuff, because that's where you get the BZ.
Benzylate.
Benzylate, yeah. So that's known as BZ, and it's a strong hallucinogenic that was developed on the MK Ultra program.
Right.
Right, and it can make people very aggressive, so they actually start fighting amongst the soldiers. So it was put on the back burner, but nothing is forgotten, particularly by British intelligence. So I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't they administer this BZ stuff to the guests who went to the pig farm? So when they wake up, they don't really remember whether they were hallucinating or not.
Right.
But the reality is there are women's body parts, including a skull split down the middle, in the freezer at the pig farm.
Wow. And it brings me back to this document because it's all about mind control and this use of psychoelectronic weapons, and doing a lot of the same types of things that you're talking about: forced memory blanking, induced changes to hearing, controlling dreams, forced waking visions, all kinds of strange things. And that pig farm story, it reminds me, didn't what's his name, James Alefantis, the guy with the pizza shop in Washington D.C., also have a pig farm somewhere?
Well, it's a good point. However, the reality is the Picton pig farm in Port Coquitlam, the reality is that they were granted a federally registered society status called Piggy Palace Good Time Society to hold entertainment and sporting events.
What is that? Piggy Palace? So is it like a charity, or what is that?
Yeah, it was a society registered by the Canadian government.
Okay, let me look that up again. Piggy Palace?
Piggy Palace Good Time Society.
You know, it brings me also to, wow, Robert Picton. I think Lee Stranahan has investigated this, but it brings me also to, we were talking about Quinn Michaels' time phone hack. Quinn's been speaking a lot about the murder of Bob Crane and his involvement with Richard Dawson, whose wife was part of the Process Church, which started in the UK and sounds similar in some regards to this. Possible shooting of snuff films, use of all kinds of sex parties and all kinds of sort of off the charts of normal. So farm owners
abnormal. You see, let me just jump in there, Jason. You see that word abnormality?
Yeah.
Right. So the people who went to that pig farm may have gone to the pig farm fairly normal, but when they got in there, they might have been administered through the food. There was actually cannibal feast going on there, this BZ stuff, and they started hallucinating. And they may very well have participated in putting the women, once they'd died, through a wood chipper. Wow. I mean, it's a scene of unimaginable horror. Right? Now, when I was campaigning, because I'm the leader of the Reform Party of British Columbia, I think it's a party of one at the moment, but when I was campaigning in a provincial election, some years ago, I was going around saying to people, well, I think you should vote for me because I'm interested in solving great crimes or unsolved crimes, such as the pig farm where perfectly decent, well, they were prostitutes, but I don't give a damn whether they're prostitutes. They're Canadian citizens. I don't care whether they're First Nations. They've got arrest records as long as they are. They're incredibly vulnerable, and they're taken off the streets and taken out of the pig farm, and they're tortured to death, a la Bernardine Dawn. Now,
is prostitution illegal in Canada or legal?
No, it's, it's, I don't know. No, I think it's legal. It's legal. It's legal in the States,
so then
isn't
that's no. But if it's legal, then that's, a legitimate job, I suppose.
Well, whatever they are, they're citizens. Whether they're doing a legitimate or illegitimate job, their departure from this earth should not be handled in that way. And the bloody justice system should be tracking down the killers. And it's not little Willie Picton or Robert Picton. That's my point. So, and that comes back further on to ultimately, we need to make a movie in that community. Some of the people will be the children or the mothers of those people who died. And I'm saying this is the greatest release of energy for the good the world has ever seen. And we can run these community-based, crowd-funded films everywhere in the world simultaneously. So we could be doing this 50 times. And you could pick a project and you could act as a catalyst. But I want to move on with Piranha, if I may.
Sure.
Right, so injectors. So there's a variety of ways of injecting this garbage into people. You can have a hypodermic needle, or you can fire a bullet at them, which is hollow-nosed, which contains the material you want in their blood system. So it could be an anticoagulant, so they're bleeding to death. That patent that I'm talking about, the ammo patent, it's the most cynical and bald statement. The language of patent applications is really pretty standard, but I'm coming to the ammo because that's the last A.
Right.
So ricin. So this is extremely toxic protein that was apparently derived from Icize Co. immunopotentiator containing ricin, which is a U.S. patent, US 06389456, and allegedly used to kill the late Georgy Markov, a Bulgarian dissident writer on a London street via a pellet fired into his leg from a hollowed out umbrella. This is classical Q in the James Bond, you know, the quartermaster, the guy who makes the gadget.
Right.
And it's no coincidence that the company that I believe took the concept of Churchill's Toyshop from the quartermaster of James Bond to Kinetic North America has got two Q's in it, right? Q-I-N-E-T-I-Q, where Q stands for energy, as I understand it. Key stands for energy, or it's a chakra or something like that. Net is for network, and IQ is for intelligent quota. So Kinetic is a British company that was involved in the breakdown or the structure of Porton Down Biological Research Center with SERCO running the facilities there, and Kinetic coming into the United States and patenting this social engineering protection appliance, which is protecting who from whom.
Right. Well, you know, you're talking about Q. What or how does this relate to QAnon, this internet phenomenon that's been happening since about November?
Well, QAnon, first of all, for me, is garbage. I mean, it's producing very much like a computer with some kind of algorithmic code, sort of keywords and hints. And a whole bunch of people are following this instead of, for example, listening to you or me. So who or what is QAnon?
Well, you've just said something that again speaks to. I mean, it's amazing because you have not yet ever spoken with Quinn Michaels, as far as I know, but what you've just said is very much in line with what he's been saying, is that QAnon seems to be artificial intelligence or a human or a group of humans utilizing artificial intelligence to generate that information.
Absolutely, and Kinetic North America's social engineering protection appliance would have exactly that as its signature. Because what it's doing, it's trawling around the internet looking for semantic and non-semantic information that might indicate, let's say, for example, you or I or Field McConnell have discovered the truth, right? So they treat us as hostile or malicious or criminal.
Well, the other interesting factor along the lines of what you're saying is that I first heard about QAnon from a YouTuber called Tracy Beans, who I definitely think is part of the crew that's been gang stalking me. She plays a low-level role and was more active back in June, perpetuating information that I'm involved with the Israeli Mossad. She never presented any evidence. She never retracted that. She never apologized for that. And I believe she's a part of this network of YouTube influencers that are each doing tiny little parts of a distributed harassment campaign that's designed to suppress the message that Crowdsource the Truth is trying to bring out.
I think you're absolutely right, and what we must do is learn how not to be decoyed or sidetracked in dealing with a bot, right? But to go up the food chain to the custodian of the patent that activates that bot, right? And the custodian is not necessarily the owner. And I'm quite ready to believe that the custodian in many cases is compromised and blackmailed. But for example, Kinetic North America Inc. has got this social engineering protection appliance patent, which allows it to unilaterally, or at least as far as the bad guys are concerned, select which semantic messages or non-semantic messages, I think that means non-verbal messages, should be treated as malicious or criminal.
Well,
now,
I'm confused
how does that fit in with the Constitution?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm confused a little bit, though, just getting back to our QAnon questions, because Dr. Jerome Corsi, who I respect very much and consider a highly intelligent man, he has become one of the biggest proponents of QAnon, and he's convinced that it's a person or persons of military intelligence. And my only trepidation there is that Dr. Corsi told me about an incident where there was some fraudulent activity on his Gmail account. And I just wonder if there wasn't some way that someone, this is purely speculation of course, but maybe interfered with his Gmail account, sent him some sort of message that deceived him or led him to believe that QAnon was real. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. There's conflicting information there, but of course,
Well,
Mr.
invite
Chavez.
QAnon, excuse me, Jason, invite QAnon to appear on your show.
Well, he certainly
right?
would.
I mean, screw this business of, hiding behind. It's time for people who are hiding behind the curtain to come out onto the stage. Let's have a look at them.
Yes.
Right? And as far as intelligence is concerned, there are many people around the world, I'm sure, are more intelligent than I am, but we can all be deceived. And in fact, that's the art of war, isn't it?
Yes. Now, let me read you a question from a viewer here relative to the patent stuff. This is this patent attorney saying, issued patents convey to the holder the right to exclude, not the right to practice. A license to a patent is typically taken so as to avoid being sued for patent infringement, not, as David says, to use for a period of time or for a particular event. And she gives the example to pay Boeing for its technology to hit the Twin Towers. Patent holders cannot be compromised by a third party's illegal use of the patent holder's technology. What do you think of that?
Well, she's dreaming. I mean, under Crown rights rules, and I suggest she studies that, whether that used to prevail in the United States, I don't know, but under Crown rights rules, in the British Crown has the right to use any patented issues, period. And it's used that as a weapon, right? There's a whole concept of what are known as submarine patents, which are filed but not published. So the development, for example, in the Manhattan Project of the various technologies associated with the atomic bomb, many of those weren't published because they didn't want to reveal to the enemy exactly how far they were progressing with the atomic bomb. After World War II, what the British discovered was the Americans were going to pursue independently of the Brits the development of the nuclear weapons, but the Brits had by then developed a whole range of chemical and biological weapons. So there was a devil's deal, if you will, between the two countries where they started sharing access to submarine or unpublished patents for use in colonial wars, if you will. So anyway, let me keep going with the Piranha because I'm right in thinking we've got to the top of the hour, right?
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry to keep derailing you.
So after the R of Piranha is an A, and that stands for anthrax, allegedly procured from MOD Porton Down through the SERCO supply chain and mixed with Evonik Degussa GmbH's pyrogenically produced silicon dioxide powder and dispersion thereof, US 753-7833-B2, for the Amerithrax attacks post 9/11. And this involves Robert Mueller, a totally corrupt former director of the FBI. Because Robert Mueller and his investigative team at the FBI discovered the source of the Ames strain of the anthrax bacteria that was in those letters that were sent to various media and Senate offices. Now, two of the letters contained Ames strain anthrax bacteria, probably from Porton Down. Sorry, are we still on? Okay, with Degussa's powder, because the anthrax bacteria, and I'm not a biologist, apparently is very heavy and it sort of stays in the ground. It's highly infectious, but you really, to get it inside you, you have to eat anthrax contaminated or whatever. But to weaponize it, they use what is known as sabotage spore powder, which increases the dispersivity of the bacteria. So when you open the envelope, a whole bunch of people got what is known as inhalation anthrax, which is extraordinarily dangerous, and it's a horrific way to die, right? Didn't kill everyone. But so what I was interested in, who gets to make this highly refined sabotage spore powder? So I Googled around and I found out there's this outfit, Evonik Degussa. Now that's an interesting company, Jason, because that made the Zyklon gas.
How do I spell
that? For the World War II gas chambers. Degussa, Degussa, and it has a US patent for this stuff.
I see it.
pyrogenically produced silicon dioxide powder. So what they've done is, and Robert Mueller knows this because he aborted the investigation into the Ames strain source, which was probably Porton Down. What the FBI should have done is they sent their people over to Porton Down and find out if there were any scientists there who might have smuggled this Ames bacteria, or Ames strain bacteria, out into the United States, where it apparently was mailed to these targeted offices after 9/11 when that fourth plane didn't hit the Capitol building.
It really seems, David, like the FBI and all of these guys are basically just involved in covering up the crimes of, these companies and the biggest people in the government.
You're right there, and that's fascinating because coming back to Christine Marcy, she was the president of the National Academy of Public Administration, which is periodically retained by Congress to make papers on various subjects. One of the papers for which she was the secretary was entitled Transformation of the FBI. And what this disgusting woman, Field's sister, Christine Marcy, did as secretary, she facilitated the transfer of, I believe, up to 5,000 FBI agents from law enforcement and crime scene investigation into thwarting terrorism.
Right.
And Robert Mueller boasted about how he was that much more efficient now in setting up the FBI to prevent future terrorist attacks. Well, how well has he done?
Well, hard to say if they're having...
Well, it's pathetic. I mean, how many terrorist attacks? They'll say they've stopped dozens, but a lot of those have been manufactured by the FBI. People who are compromised through blackmail.
Yes, I agree with that. But when I click on the email button for Christine Marcy, it does not fill in an email address for her. So I think that she is very interested in having kind of like a zero footprint presence on the internet to the greatest extent that she's able.
Yeah, and unfortunately for her, there's a few ancient articles like that Judy Mann article in the Washington Post of 1979,
yes,
where it says her baby was a Mendenhall's baby, right? And we've covered that because if it was a Mendenhall's baby and born, and this would be Jessica Marcy,
yes,
who was born in August of 1979, the Mendenhall's baby was conceived at a ceremony, presumably in November 78.
And we've made note of this very conspicuous typo that calls her Christine Mary at the top of the article here. Our friend Kevin has sent me another version of this article where the typo is not present. It was sort of like a screen capture or an image capture from the newspaper itself. And I don't know what that indicates, but it's definitely quite interesting. David, we're running close to the end here.
Yeah, let me get through to the end of the initialism. Yes. So then we have Novichok, allegedly mixed with BZ or buzz gas derived from FMC Corp's process for making I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that thing, benzylate, US 3118889 and fired through dum-dum bullets, and which allegedly, so this is my theory, that the Sergeys were actually hit with dum-dum bullets or
the
pellets.
Skripals?
Right?
The Skripals?
Yeah, Skripals, I'm sorry.
Skripal.
Sergei and Julia Skripal into a coma in Salisbury, UK, because they didn't die. If they'd been hit with Novichok, they're dead. Or else it was an attenuated version of Novichok, right? Enough for the local police to identify Russia as a possible supplier. And then the A of Piranha is ammunition, and this is really exciting. Hollow point or dum-dum bullets with contents derived from Darren Rubin's biological active bullets, systems and methods. And I urge every American who's interested in this to read this patent. It's US 92-008-77B1, 92-008-77B1, and allegedly cached in SERCO's 3PL supply chain for use in ethnic cleansing in hostile states.
And
3PL stands for... Sorry?
And there it is. I mean, again, I found it totally absurd, but here are biological active bullets, systems, and methods. Patented.
And do you know when Britain started developing biological or ethnic bullets? in the late part of the 19th century, and you'll find it at the Hague Convention.
Wow.
They'd invented a dum-dum bullet that collapsed on entry, so all of the kinetic energy would be transferred into the target. Because, and the wording of that article is hilarious. I mean, black humor, it's sort of Seinfeld. What the British discovered was, in order to maintain control of their colonies, they had to deal with crazed and fanatical barbarians charging at them, and their small bore bullets would go through these guys, and they could take up to 6 bullets and reach whereas the British wounded soldier was gentlemanly enough to know when he was wounded to lie down and wait for the ambulance and the stretcher to take them away to have their treated. But the fanatical tribesmen wouldn't. They'd keep going, you see. So they invented the dum-dum bullet, which is basically a hollow nose, which for me is the first ethnic bullet, right? Designed to keep control. Now, the point is, with this kind of salad of active agents inside the bullet, you could select Jews or whites or blacks, under the Obamacare regime, particularly if your Obamacare database is run by SERCO.
Wow.
So SERCO can now identify the abnormalities described in the Obamacare database and identify which people it would like to cleanse from the scenery.
Amazing. That's really, really amazing, David. So much to discuss here, so many aspects to this. I'm dumbfounded, I have to say.
Can I just give you the conclusion?
Please, please do.
Because people say to me, David, what am I going to do about it? Well, I am an engineer and I like to solve problems instead of describing them, right? And since we're up against an enemy that appears to have studied the art of war and places a great deal of emphasis on deception,
yes.
I think, and this was the 257th Kelly briefing. This is to Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff, with this, and this was sent yesterday, and it's up on the website. With this 257th Kelly public briefing and references, we ask you to preempt the continuing use or phantom development of dum-dum ethnic cleansing bullets in the Marcia and Drew's Piranha project by stripping SERCO, Conair, and the senior executive service out of any federal bridge contracts and transferring Boeing's encryption for asymmetric data links from SERCO's Rothschild banker to US President Trump and the Marine Corps intelligence activity. Whether people believe me or not, in 24 hours you could shut this disgusting obscenity down. Over to you.
Wow. It's amazing information, and of course people can read those briefings that David publishes for General Kelly on the Abel Danger website, which is abeldanger.org, and people should be visiting that site and checking that out. You can support Abel Danger's research there on Patreon and through the methods they have set up. My guest once again has been David Hawkins. It's always a fascinating discussion, David. People disagree. I do my best to share their alternative points of view. The patent attorney who's been communicating with me is disappointed that you're dismissive of the person rather than directly addressing the information. But perhaps we can come back to that in another conversation. I think you are presenting extremely compelling information, and I'm always shocked when you present these patents that basically detail exactly what you're saying. So I'm dumbfounded. It's amazing information, and I think that the electronic warfare document that's just come out plays into what you're talking about. Some of the things that Quinn Michaels has been discussing cross over into what you're talking about. So I think it's important for people to get away from this notion that, part of the reason I had a difficult time communicating with Kevin was that he had a limited amount of evidence that he felt was proof. And I think that people really need to distinguish between proof and evidence. And I don't think that an individual element of evidence, even if it does provide what we can agree is proof that something that someone has said is incorrect, I don't think it's conclusive proof that that person was deliberately lying. So I want people to be careful in how they evaluate these differing points of view and differing points of information, and I want to continue the ongoing conversation and keep it civil and share all this information because we can all learn from each other. David, was there anything else you wanted to give to us right now before we say goodbye for the afternoon?
Yes, I'd like to say that a crime scene has values that are important or should be important to we the people, not so much as those who are lying about the crime, but the truth and the false statements about the crime.
Yes.
Right? So if you deal with truth and falsehood, those are related through, and it sounds wordy, but it's the truth functional connectives of deductive logic. And I don't say I'm a master of it, but I've studied it most of my life. And I believe if we can apply deductive logic to crime scene investigation, we're a lot further ahead than the inductive type where we start with the motive, George Bush did it, or the Jews did it, or the Jesuits, or lizard blood creatures in the royal family, etc., because we go nowhere with that.
I agree with that. David, I want to thank you for joining me. abeldanger.org is the website. David Hawkins, my guest. Thank you for joining me, David, and thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you tonight at 7 o'clock. Harmon Wilfred is America's first refugee, and he's got more information for us. Thank you, David. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, Jason. Bye now.